Tom DiNardo, thank you so much for joining me again
Sure.
on as the Wounded Healer. We had I loved learning from you in our previous conversation around all the amazing things that you've experienced, from 3.5 angels to Native American sweat lodge. There's some angels in there. There were near-death experiences, and I'd love to explore more around um, kind of how you brought it all together. I think there's one thing that I'd love to ask also. You mentioned in 1994 you went to learn from teachers, and you mentioned the Red Road. Tell me
Yes.
a little bit more about that, and then I'd love to learn more about your near-death experiences, which seems to have opened the doors and the everything else.
So the term the Red Road
Hmm.
is more or less the general spirituality, because every Indian nation that you can think of, Arapaho, Sioux, Mandan, Hidatsa, Riccara, I mean, in Washington State, where I live, for example, there's 27 nations. And some of those nations are a conglomerate, like the Colville Confederation is a number of tribes that have come together. So you have Indian nations, then you have individual tribes that sometimes have been coalesced together because of US governmental policy. And also keeping in mind that many of the reservations that exist today, the people on those reservations were often relocated, um, not by will or by choice, but by force of the US governmental policy called Manifest Destiny. Go west, prosper,
Manifest Destiny. Oh wow, that's quite a name
manifest
for it.
destiny. Um, Meaning that the government, the US government, saw that it was, or believed that it was their divine right to take these people who have been here from the beginning. The colonialism that occurred within the United States and also in Canada, the First Nations,
Mm.
as well as Central, South American with Indigenous people around the world, has created disenfranchisement, relocation. But in the US, there's another very interesting dynamic because um, many people with mixed ancestry are living between worlds. So, for example, when you think about the United States, which predominantly is a country that has been made up of nationalities from all around the world, and I just happen to have in my ancestry a lineage of people that have pretty much have come across the oceans from other parts of the world. And each time they landed in the US, they were hated, whether it was the Irish, the Italians, and before them, Native Americans. And, the interesting thing with people with Native American ancestry is that if you've lived on the reservation, as I have, um, there's people in the spirituality, in the spiritual and medicine circles accept you because you're there for the same reasons. You're there for the spirituality. But it's interesting because many Native Americans can be brutally harsh on each other, and the humor can be very, very harsh. So, you hear terms like half breed, or you'll hear people say, "Oh, you're mixed. You're not Native at all," which is really harsh because, yes, in fact, I am. And my brother, White Eagle, who's Arapaho, also has some Irish ancestry.
Mm.
And he's very, very dark complected. I tend to be a little more olive, and he's very dark complected. But this is kind of the state of things today. There's almost like within Native American culture, this animosity and this segregationist attitude with and amongst each other rather than it being inclusive. And a lot of that even goes back into the historical accounts with wars that were fought amongst Indian nations that created great animosity. Like for example, there's blood feud still between, say, the Apache and the Navajo or the Hopi, because the Apache were the first to sign with some of the US cavalry, and then they became scouts to go and fight their own agenda against these other people. And we see this also with other nations, like my brother, who's Arapaho, his reservation is shared with the Shoshone. One of the things that he's hoping to do is to bring and to unite these people, because these were two people that traditionally warred against each other. And while a lot of these attitudes from their great great grandparents are well over 100 years old, many of those animosities carry forward today,
Yeah.
some five generations later. But back to the Red Road. The Red Road is basically, some would say it's an earth-based religion. Um, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable to resonate with that, because I think of it more akin or on par, say, with Japanese Shintoism, that yes, there's a reverence for Mother Earth, a connection to Mother Earth, but yet there's this great expansion into the universe and into creator, and the idea that we all Native Americans originate from the stars. So um, I have always found great comfort in that spirituality. And so prior to 1994, when I had the opportunity to go to the res, um, I had been, my first career out of college, I was a park ranger. And before that, I went through all the training. I was an EMT. I had the wildland firefighting training, and I had been working as a park ranger. And one particular day, we were doing a drown training drill, and most of the rangers were older. As they weren't in the shape that I was in my 20s at that time.
Yeah.
And so I was the first in the lake and the first out to the center, waited for them to come out. We were finding a dummy that had been submerged to basically replicate, in essence, a drowned victim. So we recovered the dummy, and the exercise was over. I made sure everyone got in. So I was the last one in, first one out, last one in. And when I got to shore, I wasn't feeling good. Well, what had happened was my body temperature had dropped down to 75 degrees. So from 98.6 to 75
Oh,
degrees, I went into Fahrenheit, I went into cardiac arrest. And they had thrown me into the cab of a pickup truck. They were blasting the heat. There were lifeguards there, park rangers there. And apparently I went into cardiac arrest. I started to convulse. And that's when I remember looking out the window at, I was in the passenger side of the pickup truck. The lifeguard supervisor was sitting in the seat next to me. I could see this panicked look on his face. And I looked at him, and I could see the other lifeguards and park rangers, and I could just see their auras pouring out of their skin.
sure.
And I remember saying that to the lifeguard supervisor. I said, "You have the most beautiful aura." And then the cab of the truck literally dissolved, and I shot up through, I guess, my crown chakra. And I was in this space that was, for lack of a better term, I guess you would call it heaven.
Mm.
Um, I remember hearing the sound of rushing wind in my left ear and choirs of angels in my right ear. And this gold effulgent light appeared before me that was coming into form and out of form. And it was Archangel Gabriel. And uh, it was so beautiful there. Um, it it's beyond words, because you are conscious. You are aware, you know of the I am, but you're devoid of your personality or your ego. It's
Mm.
this awareness and this being immersed in this absolute unconditional love. And so Gabriel had said, you have to go back. There's things that you need to do. And I said, no, you don't understand. I'm not going
Good.
back. Yeah, I
Yeah,
said, I'm cashing in the chips. Elvis has left the building and I'm
I'm
here.
done.
And
Yeah.
one thing I've realized is that you can't win an argument with an archangel. Um, I tried.
Yeah.
I mean, I really gave it a good effort, and I was pretty convinced. I said, no, I am not going back. And there was this feeling like being picked up in the arms of a father, and this feeling of being carried through this gold light. And I just felt kind of immobilized, like I couldn't move, but yet completely safe in the arms of this angel. And I said, Gabriel, I really don't want to go back. I really don't. And he just kind of gives me this almost a telekinetic message. He says, I know. And the most wicked of angel humor, because what is time? It's a human construct that we live by on this plane. But what is a lifetime to an angel? It's not even a blinking of an eye to them.
Mm.
So I said, Gabriel, I really don't want to come back. And he says, I know, but don't worry, you'll be back here before you know it. And then it was
Yeah.
at that moment, I'm in the cab of the pickup truck, and it was like literally being reborn. It was this catching this breath, this like life had been rebreathed and reanimated into me. And everyone around me is freaking out because they thought he's checked out, he's done, he's dead.
Yeah.
And I could hear the sirens in the background. And I looked at, and the lifeguard supervisor was there, and he's freaked out. His eyes are, see the whites of his eyes, and you're back, and they said, here I am,
Yeah.
yeah, that's me. And I said, you didn't call the fire department, did you? He says, well, yeah, of course we did. You died, you fucking idiot, excuse my language, and I said, no, but I'm here. And, so anyways, that was the first experience. And the second experience is even more bizarre. Um, I've told a lot of people about the first experience because after that, that was in 1990.
Mm.
That's really what I think changed and totally opened up the door, to the healing work, to just really, I describe that period as being sort of like the old 33 and a third LP records. I was very
Yeah.
warped, it was like I still hadn't dealt with the traumas of childhood.
Mm.
I still was arrogant, brash, but yet incredibly connected
Mm.
to creator, and having these kundalini experiences, these really crazy experiences. And when the second near death experience, I call it a near death experience, but it truly was something that went into the mystical. I had never done drugs or psychedelics. Actually, the first time I ever did that was in 2021. So
Sure.
many people are surprised.
I'm
So
after that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's the first time I ever did psilocybin was 2021, and I've never had done any drugs prior to that. And so the next experience was in 1993, and I was already involved in healing work, praying, meditating daily, seeing miracles. Um, and I'll talk some more about angelic experiences in a few minutes. But The second experience involved Gabriel. And what I remember was that I had um, literally, I call it an Ezekiel experience. It's as if my soul was lifted and raised to heaven. I had become aware that I had gone to bed, and I had become aware that my eyes must have been opened. That because I became conscious, and it was like I was lying, my body was lying in like the shape of the cross,
Mm.
but my eyes were open, and I was aware that I was either partially in my body or partially not, because I could see the ceiling and the walls around me, but there was this ether around this void, and it was like fog, and there was this brilliant light, and I was lifted up into this light, and there was tens of thousands of angels, and what appeared to be the presence of God was like this indescribable, brilliant, multicolored light that seemed to be from on high, as they say in the Bible. It was on this mountain, and there was this harmony and this, again, the wind in my left ear, the choirs of angels in the right. And I was home.
Mm.
And then at a certain point, it was like I came back down through the ether, and I was lowered back into my body. And all of a sudden, the whole, or the ether, became smaller and smaller and smaller, like a star almost. And it literally did the sign of the cross over me, which is interesting because I was recovering Catholic. So I was like, okay, didn't understand that one. But then all of a sudden, my body started to convulse violently, and I could not breathe. And I could not literally move my hands or anything, but my chest was pounding. And so I had done the only thing that I could think of doing, which was I screamed out in my mind, Gabriel, Michael. And then from the floor, it was like the whole reality of the room had changed. The walls had dissolved, and it was like this electric blue, shimmering light, and these two orbs of light that appeared. And all of a sudden, I could realize I could move, and it was Gabriel coming up through the building and through the floor. And I literally took my hands, covered them over my eyes at that point, and I could see the bones through my hands and through my closed eyes. And I was in the bed, and I curled up in a ball, and I said, Gabriel, it's too much. It's too much. Please, I know it was completely benevolent, but please tone it down. And then all of a sudden it toned down, and it was like he was standing by the side of the bed with his hands over me, like just doing the last of this energy work. And then there was still the star above the bed. And then it was like he became a beam of gold light and just went up into this star. And then the star just disappeared. And I was in the bed and still a little shaken. And I just thought, I have no idea what that was about. But to me, it was, I call it a near death experience because I had been taken, my soul lifted up on this journey,
Mm.
uh, very much like an Ezekiel experience to heaven.
very mystical as well. As there was
Yeah.
no, I mean, afterwards there were physical effects, but it wasn't because of, a physical ailment or like the first one. So
Right.
that's fascinating. It's almost like just a reminder, like remember this love. Yeah.
Yeah, it really was. It, I still I've never had an experience like those two experiences that happened again 30 years ago plus, but I have had many more experiences with angels, which I don't know if that's another episode or if you want me to
I
continue
think we
talking.
could. I'd love to just for this episode, we have about 10 minutes left.
Mhm.
Kind of how do you how do you bring them all together? Because I know you also have a love of Kali. There's angels, there's the Red Road, which is for me a lot around connection. It's connection to the earth, connection to, everything, animals, the universe, as you say. Um, is there a separation for you, or do you find that it flows as beautifully as it feels it does?
Uh, Great question, Michelle. What I am finding is everything is interconnected.
Mm,
Um, God is in everything, our creator is in everything. Um, I believe that right now, with again the completion of the Kali Yuga, which happened at the end of January, and that's when our not only the planets in our solar system were in alignment, but apparently we're at the end of the finger of this part of our galaxy in the Milky Way, and we were apparently in alignment with other galaxies at that time too. And with the end of the Kali Yuga, we're now in a period that the Hindus call the Satya Yuga. So we went out of this period of immorality and dark times, and now we're supposed to be coming into this period of rebalance. And, Native Americans have prophesized about this for hundreds of years. For example, the Hopi Indians have a prophecy for America, and they have that term poignant, which is life out of balance. Then going to um, Lakoya, which is returning to balance, and the interim is Pawaskatsi, which is life at war. So we've gone from being out of balance to this life at war, and now we're supposed to be coming back into the period of balance. And my people, the Anishinaabe, have another prophecy called the Seven Fires prophecy. And we've gone out of the seven fires and we're coming into the eighth fire, which is again this period of a new a new activation or awakening, a new consciousness that's coming about. And I think, for example, it's very interesting when if you're in the Bible Belt in the deep south of the United States, many Christians believe that the second coming is going to be this guy on a white horse with a gold crown carrying a sword. Well, hallelujah. I mean, if that's the way you
yeah,
see it,
yeah.
it could happen. But it's interesting because I think in throughout religion, we create these images as metaphor to communicate greater thoughts.
Mm,
Or this idea that to me, what I think that symbolizes a man on a horse with a gold crown and a sword is authority, power, just like the way Kali in
mm,
Hinduism is depicted is this divine feminine
mm.
who happens to be this Devi, a blue colored, goddess who's on a black horse carrying a sword wearing a gold crown. It's like, it's
There's a
interesting here
pattern.
because,
Yeah.
both of these metaphors to me symbolize a power and authority. And so when people have talked about the Christ, they often, in my opinion, and my opinions are my own. I am certainly not proselytizing or saying that everyone should think or believe the way I do. So whatever you believe, far out. more power to you. I am totally behind you, but in my belief, I think that the Christ is a consciousness. And I believe that everyone on this planet will, at some point or another, touch that consciousness. And when they do, that's when they either experience, whether it's second sight, maybe they have a prophetic moment, a moment of healing, an insight, an epiphany, one of those aha moments. But I think others are able to move more freely in and out of that consciousness. And that is when that consciousness to me would mean that your vibrational rate increases. And that's when I think when you are in that consciousness, when things like healing happen. And based on the vision that I had in Easter, and I'm putting it on the line here so someone can say this guy's a nut, or they can say this did not happen. But in this vision, an angel had appeared to me and had basically said the Pentecost will happen within 3 months. And this was March 31st, Easter. So by or before the end of June, I don't believe that it was message specific to me, but my feeling is that the holy people of the world, and it has nothing to do with whatever religion you are, whether you're Red Road, Christian, Hindu, Muslim, doesn't matter, Buddhist, the holy people of this planet, I believe, will receive some kind of an activation, a descending of Holy Spirit, an activation that will begin to awaken them. Now, in the Hindu philosophy, they think that this is going to begin the wave of people that over a 200-year period, everyone on this planet will go through this. Um, there are people like, for example, David Wilcock, who says that, by the Hindu philosophy, by the way, they believe this is going to happen by November of this year. David Wilcock believes that this will happen by May of next year, no later. And we have a number of things that are already in alignment this year. We've had some amazing astronomical events. We have this comet Arcturian, which astronomers are saying will be the most cosmologically significant event since humankind has kept recorded history. Some have likened this to being the birth of another Messiah that will come into play on this planet, or again, in the Hindu, the awakening of Kali, the return of Kali, which basically means the Satya Yuga is the liberation of all souls. So this idea is that this activation, in essence, could awaken people to become, in essence, like bodhisattvas, or people that would, in essence, be in touch with siddhis, is what the Hindus call mystical powers. But then, of course, I feel it's important to go back to the teachings of one of my teachers, Ram Dass, who always said, be on the path, focus on union with Creator. That's the goal. And he says, if some siddhis happen along the way, like a Kundalini experience or something, he says think of it as a lamppost on the path, but don't focus on the lamppost, stay on the path. And that's why one of my slogans, which is probably a good place to end this one, is I've always said, my slogan is find your path, stay on the path, be the path.
Well, that's a perfect way to end it. Thank you, Tom. And I truly look forward to the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.